Well, good morning and welcome to Orange Sunday. My name is Amy and I am the children's minister here at Heritage. And honestly, I'm used to speaking to kids a lot more. And so I get in front of adults and it makes me a little nervous. And I know I say that every time, but it seriously does. Just before first service, I was talking to Cole about it, just about having nerves. And he told me that I shouldn't have nerves because I'm just talking to our friends. And I think that that's a really great way to look at it because you truly are. And I want you to look at us as your friends as well. We are definitely not experts on anything at all. However, we care deeply and we're going through this journey as well. And so we're going to share a little bit today of some of the stuff that we have learned along the journey. And so
my name is Cole. I am Amy's son, Amy and Jason Newton. And it's nice to meet you guys. We are going to have the unique opportunity to just talk to you guys a little bit today about our experience with Orange and how this has impacted me as I've grown up, but also the way that my family has just kind of implemented these principles. We've been going to Heritage since 2006, and so Heritage and Orange has been a big part of my upbringing just as we've gone through this journey.
That's right. And as you saw in the video, and we'll probably just repeat it several times just so we really get it, but the color orange represents the partnership between family, which is represented by red, which is the heart, and yellow, which is the light of the church. And we did not come up with this concept, but Heritage feels like it's a great way to gain a better understanding of how we can partner and have the greatest impact on the next generation. And we'll be spending the next 2 weeks talking about this. Today, Cole and I will focus mostly on red, the family portion of Orange. And then next week, Brock will come in and talk more about how the church can partner with families to fully create the color orange.
Every year we take a Sunday or two to talk about the importance of leading the next generation into discipleship with Jesus. We realize that as families, we need all the help we can get. Church attendance alone is not enough. As parents or as caregivers for children, we take our children to church and hope that they will get everything they need to develop a faith. But if your kids are only encountering faith in the church and not in the home, that faith will possibly fade when they're no longer in that environment. In a way, modern churches have almost created a barrier to connection in the home, as there are often amazing programs for our preschoolers, kids, and teens. Programming is fantastic, and that's not the issue in and of itself. The unintended consequence here is that as parents, we can start to think that we are able to let the experts be in charge of making sure our children know how to be disciples. As I stand up here with our children's minister, my goal is not to diminish the impact of, the intention put into, and the value of things programmed for our children, but rather to say it just cannot replace caregivers in the home. As parents or as people caring for children, we are the biggest influence of faith in our children. And our goal at Heritage is to partner with families to help demonstrate faith to the next generation.
And this is where orange comes from. There are two different influences in a child's life. And like I said before, red represents the heart of the family, and yellow represents the light of the church. These two combined influences work together to have a greater impact rather than just having each of the influences alone. And this isn't a new concept. As a matter of fact, it was Moses that had mentioned this concept almost 3,500 years ago to the Hebrew nation. The first mention was in the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is the 5th book in the Bible, and if you want, you can turn there now, and that's where our text is going to come from. In Deuteronomy 6, we actually start in verse 1 and then skip to 4. These are the commands, the laws, and the rules that the Lord your God has told me to teach you. Obey these laws in the land that you are entering to live in. Listen, people of Israel, the Lord is our God. The Lord is the only God. You must love the Lord your God with all of your heart, and with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. Always remember these commands that I give to you today. Be sure to teach them to your children. Talk about these commands when you sit in your house and when you walk on the road. Talk about them when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them on your hands and then wear them on your foreheads to help you remember my teachings. Write them on your doorposts of your houses and on your gates. Children have always been a priority in God's kingdom. And as parents, we're asked to teach our children when we sit in our house, when we put them to bed at night, when we take them to school during the day, or when we come and just are at home. That all times during the day we have opportunities to talk to our kids, and we can have reminders around our houses that also help us remember the true thing that we're wanting to remember. And we don't come here as experts on parenting. As a matter of fact, it's quite the opposite. We're learning alongside our children how to honor God and love those around us. In a lot of ways, becoming a parent is like being thrown in the deep end of the pool with very little instruction on how to raise a child. My husband, Jason, and I have 3 boys. And Cole was Jason and I's first child, and we had to figure out a lot by trial and error. No one prepared us for the sleepless nights, the temper tantrums that he would throw, or how it would break our hearts to see him hurt, even in the smallest way. We had a lot to figure out on our own. And we weren't really thinking about what he would be like as an adult. That wasn't something that had really crossed our minds back then. We were just trying to make it through the day-to-day issues. And one strategy of parenting that is intentional is to have the main goal of imagining the end, imagining what we hope to see our children as adults, and working toward those goals throughout the time that we're raising them, and beginning with the end in mind. And you want to have your child's, the greatest priorities to just be something on your mind, and that can even change through time, but to have something intentional that you're working toward.
My wife Shelby and I recently welcomed Oliver Newton into the world, and the reality of this message today has never been clearer. We contemplate regularly how we interact with each other and Oliver, and ultimately our actions now are determined by what kind of person we want to raise Oliver to be. Imagining the end is not a one-time action either. Once you have the end pictured, it requires diligence to keep it in mind, and this can look like serving others alongside your children so that they instinctually know the shape compassion takes. If you'd like them to love deeply, start with loving them and each other deeply and develop healthy emotional boundaries. One example for us is that we love worshiping with Oliver, even knowing he doesn't quite understand it yet. Our children learn more from us than anyone else in their early lives. The way we lean on God and navigate life will start to mold them into people who are anxious or people at peace, people who are aloof or people who are intentional, people who see themselves first or put others first. When it comes to our child, I've quickly realized that I have a very limited capacity, and I need to trust in God to do what ultimately God can only do. Earlier, we read from the Old Testament in the book of Deuteronomy, where Moses gave the Hebrew nation a message from God. This was the law before Jesus came into the picture. And one of the reasons Jesus came to earth was to help people understand the law. There were several different groups of religious people that had a lot of rules and thought they had it right. They would often argue with each other and condemn each other for not adhering to their version of the law. Jesus spoke to these groups of people a lot, and they would often try and trip him up or make him look foolish. Which brings us to the book of Matthew. We're going to be in Matthew 22 today, starting in verse 35. This is the first book in the New Testament portion of your Bible. Where we start is actually right after a group called the Sadducees had been attempting to trip Jesus up through targeted questioning, and were not very successful. The Pharisees learned that Jesus had made the Sadducees look so foolish, they stopped trying to argue with him. So the Pharisees had a meeting. Then one of them, an expert in the law of Moses, asked Jesus a question to test him. He said, "Teacher, which command in the law is most important?" Jesus answered, Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and most important command. And the second command is like the first. Love your neighbor the same as you love yourself. All the laws and the writings of the prophets take their meaning from these two commands.
The message is very similar to the message that Moses had talked about 1,500 years before that. People had been following the law for centuries and trying to do their best to get it right. If you remember, Moses was also the one that brought the laws to the Jewish people. And they had been following those for centuries. The biggest difference here is that Jesus had added an element that had more to do with relationships. If we love God with all of our heart and love others as much as we love ourselves, there is no reason to have so many rules or commands, because loving God and others covers everything. The message Jesus gave when he came to earth was simple. He doesn't want to trip us up by rules or traditions that may be confusing and often misunderstood. He wants us to love him and love others.
So why do we mention this when we talk about imagining the end with raising our children? It's because we can learn a lot about how to treat others by Jesus' example. And that will ultimately be the best way to show our children who God is. That brings us to another tool we can use, which is to fight for the heart.
Most of the moments, the best moments to talk to our kids throughout life are in life, when we're just in everyday circumstances that can lead to teachable moments. And we wanted to have an example of an instance like this, and Cole had actually suggested that we tell the story about when he was in middle school and got a phone. We needed to get him a phone so that he could communicate with us for after school things and that type of thing. And so we got him a phone. And not really fully realizing what giving a middle school boy a phone, like the full ramifications of all of that. But we quickly figured that out. Because we did monitor his phone some and go through it. And on one occasion of going through it, realized that there was some stuff on there that probably he shouldn't have on there. And so we knew this was serious and wanted to have a serious conversation with him about it. And we didn't want siblings or anything else. We wanted it to be just him. And so we went and picked him up at school in the middle of the day and brought him home and sat him down on the couch to have a conversation. And of course, he was a bit blindsided by having this conversation and had a great deal of shame because of it, and broke down, and really, truly, he expressed to us how he felt that he's kind of masking for everybody else, but who he really wasn't good. And he felt like even going to church and sitting with the youth group that he had been kind of an imposter. And we were able to really talk to him about grace, and not only grace that God gives, but grace that we can give as parents, and understanding that we all make decisions that can be detrimental to us, but that doesn't define us, and that we can do better and we can work together to do better.
Now, I certainly did not propose airing my dirty laundry on stage to the church just for the sake of doing so. I thought that this would actually be a great example to exemplify the fact that without the foundation that these orange principles provided in our relationship with me and my parents, there wouldn't have been an opportunity for me to be receptive to correction. Now, we've talked about relationship over rules, and we'll touch on that a little bit more here in just a second, but I could have just dismissed what they were talking about. I could have eaten the punishment, and that would have just been the end of it. However, because there was that foundation in the relationship, and they had been imagining the end of what they wanted me to look like as an adult, and I was buying into that, even though I was foolish and a person. I was able to more easily be corrected and actually care about what they had to say. It was something that ended up forging its way into a more sustainable conversation as opposed to something that just blew up in one instance, where from there forward we were able to have conversations about these things. We were able to talk about anything. It didn't have to be something major, just struggles that I had because that door had been opened. But without any of that foundation, that door couldn't have been opened. It would have stayed closed.
Well, and we did continue for the next several weeks, even just Jason and I one-on-one talking with Cole, and even telling him times that we were in middle school and some of the decisions that we had made and some of the ramifications from that. And so it didn't just end with that. We continued to have conversations. Even still, we have conversations about just the reality of how human we are and how fallible we are. But then also trying to strive to work together to be better. Because every parent is on a journey from control to influence. And this may be contrary to how many of us were raised. I was raised in a home where control was the parenting style, and we had to submit or we were going to be punished. And we didn't talk a lot about the relationship part or the emotional part of that. And this is not a model that Jesus intended. He was more about relationships with people. As a matter of fact, he gave up all control out of love for us. His example of love was one of the greatest tools that we can use as parents. And in Matthew 22, Jesus said the most important thing that we can do is to love God with everything in us and to love others as ourselves. The most important thing that we can do is to have relationships. We need to communicate in a way that gives the relationship value and shows respect to our children. And if you're going to have influence with your children, then you have to have a good relationship with them. And we don't have enough time to dive into all the different tools and all the different aspects that we can do as parenting. And I actually have resources if anybody would like to get some of those references to be able to really go deeper into it. But there are a couple of other simple things to do, and one of them is to create a rhythm and increase the amount of quality time that you have together. As families, we get up in the morning and we drive down the road and we have breakfast together. We do different things every day in a rhythm. And if we're intentional about the things that we do in that rhythm and add in things that can be life-giving and that can really show the love of God to our children, and that's their regular process and their rhythm, it's going to stick. That's going to be something that plants deep into their hearts through the years.
Another component of that, and this is kind of multifaceted, is making it personal. Now, that doesn't start actually with your children, it starts with yourself. Something that I was not prepared for when I became a parent was the fact that I had to grow so much in order to do the things I needed to do. I was faced with circumstances that I just hadn't dealt with before. And I have a brother who's 11 years younger than I am, so I thought I just had a pretty good idea. But the buck was passed, and it was totally different this time. So the fact that I had to grow enough in order to actually minister and love my child the way that I need to is something that I am still working on and will continue working on, because it just can't stop there. Another component is just understanding your children, especially if you have multiple of them. The ways that you interact with them have to be unique. And I'm sure that I'm preaching to the choir, as a lot of people in here, they might have multiple children. But for my siblings and I, we are very different. The way that we communicate, the way that we internalize things. I have always worn my heart on my sleeve and just been very vocal about things. And if I have a problem, you're going to know about it. But that's not the case with my siblings entirely. They just come from different perspectives, and my parents had the opportunity to reach them where they are. And that's part of that rhythm as well, is understanding where your children are at different stages and meeting them there.
Well, and one of the ways that we've found, strategic ways to do that with our boys is to meet them where they are. To either have a hobby that both of you like that you can do together, or it might be even developing a new hobby just so that you can hang out with them. And that's one of the things that I had done. About 9 years ago, game called Pokemon Go came on the scene, and both Cole and Luke got it. And it was on their phones. You could go to the park and play and catch Pokemon, and you could do things together. And I thought that would be a great way to connect with them. And so I got Pokemon Go, and we have spent hours and hours Pokemoning together. And as a matter of fact, we still do. And doing things like that, having ways that is meeting them on their level. I don't think I would be playing Pokemon Go, if it wasn't for my kids. However, it's something that I wanted to do so that I could be with them and connect with them. And the bottom line of all of this is that we need to remember the message that Jesus came to tell us, that relationship overrules. And this doesn't mean that we have no rules, but we have to create loving relationships built on trust and respect. And the rules a lot of times don't end up getting broken when we have a system like that.
Would you mind joining us in a prayer as we close out? Lord, thank you for bringing all of us here this morning. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to just speak from some of our experiences and to help people get to know you a little bit better through the things that we've done in our lives. Please help our message to fall in the ways that it needs to, for people to get to know you better because of the things that we've said today. As we go through this next week, just grant us the courage and the ability to continue to walk with you and understand the things that you want for us in our lives. Lord, thank you so much for everything you've done for us, and in your name, amen.
Amen.